And welcome back to WCCF Tech TV, everyone. This is Keith once again, and I feel like today we could have a pretty good discussion and an explanation on a very valid question that we get quite often on our graphics card comparisons, performance evaluations, what have you, of new games. A lot of people ask, Keith, why do you guys use the reference RX 480? Don't you know it throttles? Well, it was really bad at launch, but it has gotten a lot better. But the absolute truth of the matter is we use the reference cards as much as possible. So our 470 is reference, 480 is reference, 1060, 1070, and 1080 are all reference cards. The 460 and the 1050 that we have are not reference models because, quite frankly, those are very difficult to get a hold of. And we did match up these fairly well against each other. So the 1050 that we have is comparable to the 460 on the market. So if you were to go buy either one, they would be roughly around the same price, and they fit around the same spot in those stacks and are fairly representative of those cards' performance. However, they are a bit on the high end, which in that category isn't that drastic. But the real reason we use the reference models for our comparative purposes is this is a baseline. This is where those cards start. So you wouldn't buy another 480 or 580 for that matter and it perform worse than the reference. Now that is something to keep in mind when you see comparisons between other cards, is that maybe one vendor's reference design is better than the other one, and that particular vendor's aftermarket cards may not perform as well. If you see, we did do a review on the RX 570 from Sapphire. We have that. We do have aftermarket cards, and that allows us to give a good comparison of what the base performance for that model versus the aftermarket overclocked. So if we had, let's say for argument's sake, on the 1060, let's say we used an EVGA super clocked GTX 1060 as our daily test system. Now if we got in another 1060 to compare it, we wouldn't know, we would only have an idea of where it compares to another aftermarket variant, which is fine to an extent, but only if you were looking to purchase one of those two models. You don't know where it started from, so you don't know how much of a benefit there is in the aftermarket version versus the reference design, or Founders Edition if you prefer to use that language when referring to the NVIDIA cards. But the real reason, again, like I said, is not to make either card look bad. It's not to point out flaws in any of the cards. It's simply to show a baseline performance. So the truth is, in reality, in actual gaming, if you bought an aftermarket version of either one of these cards that we review, you're probably going to get better performance than what we're showing. The problem with buying the aftermarkets first is that we're showing that specific card, not necessarily the GPU. So our RX 480 is representative of what AMD envisioned the RX 480 to perform as based off of their design. And the same goes for the 1060 and the 1070 and 1080, because if you sit on that side of the fence, you're like, Keith, why are you using a Founders Edition 1080? Well, NVIDIA provided that one. We bought the 1070, and we wanted to make sure that, just like we did the 1060, and we wanted to make sure that we had a very baseline comparative graphics card. So as new generations come out, we can really take a look at the benefit over there rather than comparing last generation's overclocked aftermarket designs versus new reference designs. So that's what we really wanted to be able to show you. We're not out here to make anybody look better or worse than than each other. We're just trying to show you a very honest representation of how they perform. That's why a lot of the game performance videos that you see now are including overlays, and they're being recorded on a separate system so that we can deliver more than just graphs and actually show you how these graphics cards perform. So I'm sure there's some people out there that still think we should do all aftermarket overclocked variants, and we did that in the past when that was all we had available. But as this generation of Pascal and Polaris cards came into play, we did the best we could to make sure we stuck with reference designs, so that when we do a review of something like the RX 570 from Sapphire, their Nitro Plus model, we can show you the real benefit of that aftermarket overclocked variant. Well, I do hope that some of this made sense to somebody. I hope it answered a few questions that a lot of people may have had in the past as to why we use the cards that we use. Just like with our APUs, we don't. I'm very capable of overclocking an APU on both memory and the core as well as the GPU and get even better performance, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to dress something up. We're trying to give you what it performs like out of the box, and that's all there is to it. So I hope you guys got something out of this. I hope it was good for those who, again, had those kind of questions and wondered why we did it that way. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And if you found this video entertaining or informative whatsoever, please feel free to like it and subscribe, and we'll catch you all in the next video.